Professor Munang, the Chancellor of Egerton University, distinguished colleagues, all protocol observed. Good morning, and thank you very much for the opportunity to have a discussion with you this morning, especially on this critical aspect of sustainability and research, and more so in this global gathering here. I say critical because we seek to optimally position research in a way that is not just the driver, but a critical cog in the success of any venture. Because from what we've heard from Professor Munang, from the PS, and from the last speaker, it is very clear that we cannot continuously do things the way they've been done before, and take into consideration the challenges that the continent of Africa is facing today. We need a paradigm shift. A paradigm shift that can be able to drive transformational change, especially so under the changing climate. I like to contextualize things within the context of Africa using what Africa have also got in abundance. It's proverbs. As Chinua Achebe will say, proverbs are like palm oil with which words are eaten. Knowledge without wisdom is like water in the sun. This African proverb in the context of this discussion today is telling us one thing, that research is the epitome of knowledge, the cutting edge of knowledge in any sector, but without the wisdom of matching it to areas of comparative and competitive strengths, especially of solving prevailing threats and tapping into opportunities in an economy, then its youthful impacts remain largely subdued. As a typical example, just 2 days ago, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change released the latest State of Science report on climate change. The findings are not amusing. Though not strange, the globe is headed to a 1.5 degree warming sooner than was earlier projected on a massive 20 years from the 2050s now to the 2030s, which is just about 12 years from today. A 1.5 degree warming scenario is the threshold that is set by the Paris Climate Change Agreement, which is to avoid the worst climate change in the world should be able to stay below that. But with what we know today, with climate change already redefining the contours of the entire Africa's development, including devastating 75% shrinkage of economic productivity in developing countries, mostly so in the African continent, is telling us one thing, that without the latest knowledge, without research applied to be able to bridge the gap between policy and action, Africa's transformational change will never ever happen. That therefore means research must then take a different paradigm shift. Research should then therefore not appear to operate in silos. Research should therefore not be isolated from mainstream development policy and actions. And it is no wonder that Africa's unenviable position as the most vulnerable region persists year in and year out. This disconnect is not only in matters of climate change. When you take the African Union Agenda 2063, which represents the high-level continental development policy to create an inclusive, climate-resilient Africa and ensure that we create the Africa we want. But when you look at this, within the current discourse in the entire continent today, there is a deafening silence on the role of research in optimally implementing this timely blueprint agenda for the continent. The same goes for the Sustainable Development Goals, we intend to leave no one behind. Close at home, right here in Kenya, as the PS did indicate, the Kenya's Big Four agenda stand out as potentially transformational in accelerating Kenya's socio-economic transformation. But when you listen to the discussion around this, there is a deafening silence. The silence on the role of research in optimizing the implementation of this Big Four is once again deafening. This urgently needs to change. And this discussion here today provides that opportunity, not only to see this blueprint agenda, whether it is Vision 2030 of Kenya or whether it is Agenda 2030 and the Sustainable Development Goals, and more so the blueprint agenda, the African Union Agenda 2063, research needs to become the epic center to drive that transformational agenda forward. Distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, the urgency of this paradigm shift cannot be overstated, especially considering the prevailing realities that threaten the realization of our shared aspiration of sustainable inclusive growth. Let's just put things in perspective. Just imagine for a second a mother who buries a child before that child reaches the age of 5. Imagine for a second in the continent as we're speaking today, over 240 million citizens are going to bed with their stomach aching of hunger. 50% of mothers bury their beloved children before they reach the age of 5. A continent importing food worth $35 billion each and every year. But at the same time, because of inefficiencies in the entire global value chain, $48 billion have been lost across each and every year due to post-harvest losses, largely driven by suboptimal value addition. To cover this deficit, I've indicated the importation costing $35 billion is actually depreciating foreign reserves. The implication is that the continent, when you juxtapose $35 billion with $48 billion, you're talking about $83 billion. What of food? What of jobs? What of food security opportunities every single year? And when we take the case of Kenya, Kenya is losing almost about $500 million as a result of post-harvest losses. But in a continent, as we're speaking today, which is almost 20 times less productive than those of developed countries with whom we compete in global markets, if you take the example of the cocoa value chain, where Africa has the largest producer, only about 2% of the 100 billion a year proceeds from chocolates end up in Africa. That means that Africa is sweating and others are eating sweets. This means up to about $98 billion worth of income, worth of job and revenue opportunity slip through our grabs each and every year. This is unacceptable. And we are talking amidst challenges of unemployment, especially of the youth, where each and every year, 12 million youth are getting into the labor market and competing with jobs, with just about 3 million jobs. That means each and every month, as we speak today, 1 million youth are getting into the labor market and competing with jobs that are less than 250,000. And this number is projected to escalate to 350 million youth competing for fewer jobs in less than 17 years from today. And what's on top of this is climate change, as earlier indicated, which is projected to shrink Africa's economy by a whopping 75% and will only compound this dire scenario. The implication, glaring in front of our eyes, priority challenges we face as a continent cannot be underestimated, and these cannot be solved without taking research as a prime entry point into this. So the space of research is visible to each and everyone in informing policy decisions, which have been largely absent. And what needs to happen is that research in this continent, regardless of sector, needs to be premised on directly responding to these priority challenges, regardless of how small the effort is. This logic is eloquently expressed in an insightful African proverb, that he who earns calamities eats it with his family. We all share the calamity of an economically stagnating Africa, but what we know is that African solutions are global solutions. If you take the impulse that Professor Wadinga mentioned, that innovation came from Kenya, but that innovation is transforming Kenya and other countries across the continent, even the world are learning from that. But that is as a result of research. And that research can help move beyond just M-Pesa as a monetary transaction using mobile applications, but also now it is moving to decentralizing clean energy to actors through what is called M-Kupa. And the list goes on. Distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, what we know is that every adversity carries with it a seed of equal or greater benefit. What this African proverb tells us, it tells us one fundamental truth, that problems are disguised opportunities. It tells us that solving problems, there is a reward in solving problems. Africa's priority challenges provide a golden opportunity for research to cement its rightful position at the center of informing development policy, at the center of ensuring that implementation actions cannot happen in silos. How this can become the norm is the main thrust of my discussion with you this morning, and allow me to share with you 4 potential entry points for research to guide further deliberations as we discuss today. Distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, an amusing yet insightful African proverb reminds us that a man does not wander far from where his corn is roosting. This proverb underscores my first point. At the core of what is needed to happen is that research efforts across the continent needs to be exercised from a strategic position or perspective of maximizing what Africa has got in abundance, what I call the catalytic sectors. You can only